I found out I no longer belonged to my family during a Thanksgiving dinner I was still expected to host. The turkey was dry. That's the detail that stays with me even now. I had spent all morning cooking in my apartment, basting and checking the temperature like it mattered, like doing everything right would somehow protect me from what was already decided. My parents arrived first, right on time. My mother kissed my cheek and said the place looked cozy the way people do when they don't mean it. My father barely looked up from his phone. He was already answering emails for the family company, the one I had grown up believing would someday include me. My younger sister arrived last, carrying a store-bought pie and a smile that felt rehearsed. Her name is Lauren, she is 29, and she already knew what I didn't. We sat around my dining table pretending this was normal. Small talk, weather, traffic. My mother commented on how quickly time was passing, how families had to plan carefully for the future. That word, carefully. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "There's something we should talk about," he said, setting his fork down with deliberate calm. I felt it then, that tightening in my chest, the instinct I'd learned over years of being the reasonable one. "Okay," I said. "We finalized some paperwork last month," he continued. "Estate planning, business continuity." My sister kept eating, didn't look up once. My mother reached for her wine glass. "We didn't want to burden you with details," she said. "You've always been so independent." Independent. That was the word they used when they wanted to excuse exclusion. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked. My father folded his hands. The will, the trust, ownership structure. The room felt smaller, and I said, "And we made Lauren the primary beneficiary and successor," he said. "It made the most sense." For a moment, no one spoke. I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me, the faint sound of traffic outside. Life continuing unaware it had just shifted. "I'm sorry," I said. "Did you say primary?" My mother nodded. "You'll still be included, of course, just not in a leadership capacity." "Not leadership. Not control. Not first." "What does included mean?" I asked. My father hesitated. "A contingency share." "Contingency." The word tasted bitter. "So if something happens to her," I said slowly, "then I matter." Lauren finally looked up. "Don't be dramatic," she said lightly. "This isn't about feelings." I stared at her. "Then what is it about?" She shrugged. "Reality." My mother leaned forward. "You've always been capable. You built your own career. Lauren needs guidance." "She works for you," I said, "in the company." "Yes," my father replied, "which is exactly why this works." I felt something inside me go very quiet. "You decided all this without telling me," I said. "We didn't think you'd want the stress," my mother said quickly. "And honestly, we thought you'd understand." That was the moment. Not the betrayal, not the paperwork. The assumption. They had assumed my silence all these years was agreement, that my stability meant consent. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "When was this finalized?" I asked. "Early October," my father said. I nodded. I had been out of state that month, traveling for work, missed calls, unreturned messages. Convenient. "And the business," I said. "Grandma's shares." My father's jaw tightened, just slightly. "They were consolidated," he said. "Into what?" I asked. "The trust," he replied. Lauren smiled again, thin and satisfied. "That was always the plan," she said. I looked at all three of them, really looked, and understood something I had never allowed myself to admit before. This wasn't new. This was revealed. "Okay," I said quietly. My mother frowned. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated. "Now I know how this family works." I walked to the kitchen and picked up the cranberry sauce I had made from scratch, the one my mother had praised earlier. I carried it to the trash and dropped it in. Lauren gasped. My mother stood. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "I'm done contributing to a table where I don't have a seat," I said. My father stood too. "You're overreacting." "No," I replied. "I'm finally reacting accurately." I grabbed my coat and bag. "Thanksgiving is about gratitude," my mother said sharply. "And you're being ungrateful." I turned at the door. "You taught me everything I know about fairness," I said. "I'm just applying it." As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. A notification. An email preview. From a law firm I didn't recognize. Subject: confirmation of trust amendment. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I already knew. And whatever they thought they had settled quietly was about to become very loud. I read the email from the law firm at 1:47 in the morning, sitting on the edge of my bed with my coat still on. I hadn't meant to come home and stop moving. I'd planned to walk, drive, do anything that would delay the moment I had to look directly at what they had done. But exhaustion has a way of pinning you down, forcing truth into your hands, whether you're ready or not. The message was polite, professional, final. It confirmed that an amendment to the family trust had been executed effective immediately. It listed new allocations, governance authority, and succession language. My sister's name appeared repeatedly. Mine appeared once. Secondary beneficiary, non-voting, No managerial discretion. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They hadn't just made a decision, they had formalized my absence. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I had always been the one who processed disappointment internally quietly. But this wasn't disappointment. This was clarity. The kind that arrives when something breaks so cleanly, there's no confusion about the shape of the damage. At 2:12, my phone rang. My mother. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice controlled but tight. "We didn't mean for you to leave like that. You embarrassed your father. Call me when you calm down." Calm down. The phrase made my jaw tighten. At 3 in the morning, I finally slept only to wake up less than 3 hours later with the same thought looping through my mind. They did this without me. Not forgot, not misunderstood, without. I called in sick to work and sat at my kitchen table with coffee growing cold in my hands. I replayed the last year carefully, not emotionally looking for the gaps I had ignored. The missed calls, the sudden formality in emails from my father, the way Lauren had started using words like stakeholders and governance at family dinners like she was practicing. She hadn't needed practice. She'd already been chosen. At 9:30, I searched the law firm listed in the email. Estate planning, trust administration, family-owned business succession. I called. The receptionist answered with rehearsed warmth. I gave my name. There was a pause. "One moment," she said. When the attorney came on the line, his tone was cautious. "Ms. Harris, I believe your parents are the primary contacts on this matter." "I'm listed as a beneficiary," I replied, "which means I'm entitled to information." Another pause. "I can confirm receipt of the amendment," he said, "but any questions should be directed to the trustees." "My parents," I said. "Yes," he replied. I ended the call without thanking him. They had structured this perfectly. Authority centralized, questions deflected. Everything clean on paper, insulated by language that made exclusion sound responsible. At 10:15, Lauren texted me. "You didn't have to make a scene." I stared at the message. "You didn't have to erase me," I typed, then deleted. Instead, I wrote, "When did you know?" She replied almost immediately, "Since August." The room felt suddenly very still. So while I was helping my parents review vendor contracts, while I was flying out of state for work, while I was being praised for being low maintenance, they were planning. I typed, "And you were okay with it?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Dad said it was better this way, less conflict. Less conflict, meaning less resistance. I didn't respond. At noon, I did something I had never done before. I called a lawyer for myself. Her name was Judith Miller. Estate litigation, trust disputes, mid-50s. Her voice was steady, unhurried. I told her everything, starting with Thanksgiving dinner and ending with the email timestamp. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You weren't disinherited," she said finally. "You were neutralized." The word landed hard. "What can I do?" I asked. "That depends," she replied. "Do you want peace or do you want truth?" I didn't hesitate. Truth. "Then we start by asking questions they didn't expect you to ask," she said. She explained my rights carefully. Disclosure, accounting, the difference between a trust designed for continuity and one designed for control. "Did anyone explain why your sister was chosen?" she asked. "They said she needed guidance," I replied, "that I was capable on my own." Judith sighed softly. "That's not a legal reason. That's a narrative." At 2:30, she sent a formal request to the firm. Polite, precise, difficult to ignore, requesting full copies of all trust documents, amendments, and asset schedules in which my name appears. At 3, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. He stood in the doorway like a man who still believed he belonged there. "You hired a lawyer," he said. "Yes," I replied. "This isn't necessary," he said. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "You finalized legal documents without informing me," I said. "That made this necessary." He exhaled sharply. This was about stability. "For whom?" I asked. "For the business," he replied. "And Grandma's shares?" I asked. His eyes flicked away. "They were consolidated," he said again. "Under what authority?" I asked. "You don't need to concern yourself with that," he snapped. There it was. I folded my arms. "I already am." He softened his tone. "You've always been strong. Lauren needs protection." "You taught me strength meant not asking for help," I said. "Now you're punishing me for it." "That's not fair," he said. "It's accurate," I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "This will damage the family." I met his gaze. "You already did that. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." After he left, my phone buzzed again. "Lauren, Judith just emailed me." I frowned. Judith hadn't mentioned contacting Lauren. I typed about what. She replied, "They're asking me to sign something, a statement saying the changes were mutual." Mutual. Meaning I had agreed. Meaning they wanted my silence retroactively. "Don't sign anything," I typed. "Not yet." Her response came slower this time. "I don't want to fight them." Neither did I thought. But that option was gone. At 5:40, Judith called. They responded, she said, partially. She explained they had sent summaries, not originals. Enough to acknowledge the request, not enough to answer it. They're testing whether you'll push, she said. I will, I replied. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment watching the sky darken outside the window. I thought about every time I had been told I was easy, reasonable, not demanding. They had mistaken my restraint for permission. And now that misunderstanding was documented. Because the moment I asked for the truth, they started hiding it. And that was when I knew this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was something much bigger. Something they were afraid to let me see. The documents arrived 3 days later in a thick envelope marked confidential, the kind meant to intimidate more than inform. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on my kitchen counter while I made coffee, while I straightened a stack of mail that didn't matter, while I gave myself time to remember who I was before every conversation became a negotiation. When I finally slid a finger under the seal, the paper inside smelled faintly of toner and legal certainty. Judith had warned me. Partial disclosure often looked impressive on purpose. Weighty, complicated, designed to exhaust people into compliance. I spread everything out on the table and started reading slowly. Trust summaries. Asset outlines. Organizational charts that used arrows instead of explanations. My sister's name appeared at the top of every page, followed by titles that implied authority without explicitly stating it. Managing beneficiary, successor trustee, operational oversight. My name appeared once buried in a paragraph labeled residual interest. Residual. What was missing mattered more than what was included. No original trust, no amendments attached, no accounting history. I took photos and sent them to Judith with one line. This is incomplete. She called me within minutes. They're controlling the narrative, she said, which means there's something they don't want you to see. What kind of something, I asked. Usually, she replied, it's about timing. Timing. I thought back to August, to the way my mother had suddenly insisted Lauren attend every meeting, to the trip I'd taken in September that my father had encouraged, saying I deserved a break. While I was gone, decisions were made permanent. Judith explained the next step. A formal demand for accounting, a deeper look into how assets were moved and when. This won't stay quiet, she warned. I don't want quiet, I said. I want accurate. That evening, my mother called again. This time I answered. You've upset your sister, she said immediately. Then she understands how it feels now, I replied. She sighed. Why are you doing this? Because you did, I said, and I didn't consent. You're being stubborn, she said. I'm being informed, I replied. She paused. We raised you better than this. The words were familiar, the tone disappointed, the implication clear. I leaned against the counter. You raised me to pay attention. She didn't respond. After the call, I sat in the quiet and let myself feel something I had avoided since Thanksgiving. Grief, not for the trust, not for the money. For the family I had thought I was part of. The next morning, Judith forwarded me an email that changed everything. They made a mistake, she wrote. Attached was an internal memo from the law firm sent in error as part of the disclosure packet. It referenced an earlier amendment I hadn't been told about, executed under power of attorney, prior to beneficiary notification. I stared at the words until my chest tightened. Power of attorney, my grandmother. She had been sharp until the very end. Suspicious of paperwork, proud of her independence. She used to joke that lawyers made money by counting on people not reading carefully. She would never have signed something she didn't understand. I called Judith immediately. This power of attorney, I said. Who held it? There was a pause. Your father, she replied. The room felt suddenly too small. They used it. Judith continued carefully to restructure assets before her death. And Lauren, I asked. She wasn't trustee yet, Judith said, but she benefited. I closed my eyes. They hadn't just excluded me. They had preempted me. At noon, Lauren showed up at my apartment. She looked younger than usual, less confident, like someone who had been handed something heavy without instructions. They're saying you're accusing them of fraud, she said. I'm asking for documents, I replied. If there's no fraud, they should be eager to provide them. They were trying to protect the family, she insisted. From what I asked, she hesitated. From risk, she said finally. What risk? I pressed. She looked away. The business isn't as clean as they made it sound. There it was. What kind of not clean? I asked. She swallowed. Loans, guarantees, things tied to the trust. And Grandma's shares, I asked. Her eyes flicked up. They said it was temporary. Temporary? The same word my parents had used. Did you see the power of attorney? I asked. No, she said quickly. Dad handled that. I studied her face. Not for guilt, but for understanding. You knew enough to benefit, I said quietly, just not enough to feel responsible. She flinched. They told me you'd be fine, she said. That you always land on your feet. I nodded slowly. That's the problem. She sat down heavily. What are you going to do? I met her eyes. I'm going to find out exactly what they moved when they moved it and why they didn't want me there to see it. And if it blows up, she asked. I didn't look away. Then it was already unstable. That night, Judith sent the next letter. Formal demand, full accounting, original trust documents, all amendments, all asset transfers executed under power of attorney. No emotion, no accusation. Just law. By morning, my phone was full. My father, my mother, Lauren. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat at my table and reviewed my grandmother's old letters, the ones I had saved without knowing why. She had always said the truth was easiest to manage when you let it be visible. They had hidden it, and now the hiding itself was becoming the story. When Judith called in the afternoon, her voice was steady but serious. They're resisting, she said, which means this is headed toward confrontation. I looked out the window watching people move through the city, unaware of the quiet reckoning unfolding inside my family. Let it, I said. Because the moment they chose secrecy over honesty, they stopped being entitled to my silence. And whatever they were protecting with that power of attorney, I was getting closer to it. Close enough to finally understand why they needed me sidelined, and why they were so afraid of what would happen if I wasn't. The resistance hardened overnight. Judith called me before 8, her voice clipped in a way that told me this was no longer procedural. They refused, she said. I sat up in bed. Refused what? Full disclosure, she replied. They're claiming discretionary authority and family privacy. Family privacy. The phrase felt almost laughable now. What does that mean for us, I asked. It means, she said carefully, they're choosing confrontation. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling, letting the weight of that settle. Confrontation wasn't something I feared. It was something I had been trained to avoid. There was a difference. They also filed a preemptive statement, Judith continued. To whom I asked. To protect themselves, she replied. And to frame you. The email arrived while we were still on the phone. It was addressed to trustees, advisors, and select family stakeholders. I recognized names immediately. People who had watched me grow up. People who would read this and believe it. The message described me as emotional, estranged, uninvolved. It emphasized my independent lifestyle and suggested my recent actions were driven by resentment rather than fact. They had put my personality on trial before the facts could speak. Judith was quiet while I read. They're establishing a narrative, she said finally, which tells me they're afraid of what a neutral record would show. I closed the email. So what's next? We escalate, she said, formally. By noon, she had filed a notice demanding court-supervised accounting. No more private back and forth. No more curated packets. An impartial eye. That afternoon, my father called. I answered not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to hear how the tone had changed. You're forcing this into a public forum, he said without greeting. You made it public when you rewrote my role, I replied. This could destroy the business, he snapped. Then you should have thought about that before hiding behind Grandma's power of attorney, I said. Silence. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. You don't know what you're stirring up. I know exactly what I'm uncovering, I said, and you know it too. He exhaled sharply. You've always needed to feel right. I almost laughed. No, I said calmly. I needed to be informed. He hung up. An hour later, Lauren texted me. They're saying you're trying to take control. I stared at the screen. I typed back slowly. I'm trying to understand how it was taken without me. She didn't reply. That evening, I went through old emails I had never thought twice about. Messages from my father asking me to review contracts. From vendors thanking me for clarifications. From accountants responding to questions I hadn't realized were significant at the time. There it was. Evidence. I hadn't been uninvolved. I had been useful. And then I had been removed. I forwarded everything to Judith. Her response came quickly. This matters a lot. The next morning, a new complication surfaced. Judith called again. There's something else, she said. Something they didn't anticipate. What I asked. They've been using the trust to secure personal guarantees, she said. Quietly. My stomach tightened. Explain, I said. The business took on risk, she replied. Instead of absorbing it directly, they shielded themselves through the trust, which now lists Lauren as successor, meaning my sister wasn't just inheriting assets. She was inheriting exposure. They moved the chessboard, I said. Yes, Judith replied. And now they don't want anyone counting the pieces. That afternoon, Lauren came back. She didn't knock this time. She rang the bell and waited arms crossed, jaw tight. They're saying you're going to ruin my life, she said, the moment I opened the door. I stepped aside and let her in. Sit, I said. She didn't. Is that true? I met her eyes. I don't know yet. Her voice cracked. They told me everything was clean. They told me nothing, I replied. She finally sat, hands shaking slightly. They want me to sign as acting trustee, immediately. I felt a chill. Have you? Not yet, she said. I wanted to talk to you first. That was new. Why, I asked. Because I don't think they're telling me everything she said. And because I think you were never supposed to ask. I leaned forward. Then don't sign anything until you understand what it binds you to. They're saying delay makes me look disloyal, she said. I nodded. That's how pressure works. She rubbed her temples. What if they've been lying to both of us? I didn't soften my voice. Then the truth will protect you, not silence. She looked at me for a long moment. You're not doing this to punish them, are you? I thought carefully before answering. No, I said. I'm doing this so I don't disappear. That night, Judith forwarded another message. They requested mediation, she wrote, which is interesting. Why, I asked when she called. Because people who are confident don't ask for mediators, she replied. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Neutral location, neutral language, but nothing about it felt neutral. My parents wanted to regain control. Lauren wanted reassurance. And I wanted the truth on record. As I went to bed, I realized something that made my chest feel strangely light. They were no longer managing the timeline. They were reacting to it. And the harder they pushed for silence, the clearer it became that whatever they had hidden under that trust was never meant to withstand daylight. Not from me. Not anymore. The mediation was scheduled for Tuesday morning in a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. Neutral space, they called it. No family photos on the walls. No company logos. Just a long table, a pitcher of water, and chairs placed at equal distances to suggest balance that didn't exist. Judith arrived with a thin folder and nothing else. That alone made my parents uneasy. They came together as they always did, a practiced front. Lauren arrived separately and sat closer to me than to them, though she avoided my eyes. The mediator was a retired judge with a calm voice and a reputation for efficiency. He opened with ground rules, confidentiality, respect the illusion that everyone was here by choice. My father spoke first. We're here because this has gotten out of hand, he said. What started as a private family decision has turned adversarial. Judith didn't respond. She looked at the mediator instead. I represent Ms. Harris, she said evenly. We're here because material information was withheld. My mother leaned forward. We never intended to hurt anyone. I felt the familiar pull to de-escalate, to translate, to soften. I didn't. The mediator nodded. Let's identify the core issues. Judith spoke. Authority, disclosure, and the use of a power of attorney to transfer assets prior to death without beneficiary notification. The room tightened. My father's jaw clenched. That's a gross mischaracterization. Then it should be easy to correct with documentation, Judith replied. The mediator turned to my parents. Can you provide the original trust and amendments? My father hesitated. My mother spoke instead. Those documents are complex, she said. They could be misunderstood. Lauren shifted in her seat. Misunderstood by whom, I asked quietly. My mother looked at me, surprised I'd spoken. By you, she said. You've always taken things personally. I felt something settle behind my ribs. Not anger, precision. You made decisions about my future without telling me, I said. That's not personal, that's factual. The mediator raised a hand. Let's stay focused. Judith slid a single page across the table. This is an internal memo referencing an amendment executed under power of attorney. We'd like clarification. My father's eyes flicked to it, then away. That was administrative, he said. Administrative actions still require good faith, the mediator said. Silence stretched. Lauren cleared her throat. I didn't know about that amendment, she said. My mother turned sharply. Lauren! No, Lauren continued, voice shaking slightly. I didn't. I was told everything was finalized later. The mediator looked at her. Is that true? She nodded. Yes. My father's face hardened. This is not the time. It's exactly the time, Judith said. The mediator leaned back. If the successor trustee was unaware of asset movements executed under a power of attorney that's relevant, my father exhaled sharply. We were trying to protect the company. From what I asked. No one answered. Judith broke the silence. From personal exposure. My mother stiffened. That's an accusation. It's an inference, Judith replied, based on incomplete disclosure. The mediator tapped his pen. I'm going to ask directly. Were trust assets used to secure personal guarantees? My father didn't answer immediately. Lauren looked at him. Dad? He sighed. There were risks. The word hung in the air. Risks you didn't tell me about, Lauren said. Risks you hid from me, I added. My mother's voice cracked. We did what we thought was necessary. Necessary for whom, I asked. The mediator spoke again. Given what I'm hearing, I'm recommending a pause. My father frowned. A pause. Yes, the mediator said. On any further execution of trustee authority, including signatures. Lauren's eyes widened. My mother stood. You can't be serious. I am, he replied. Until full accounting is provided, proceeding would be unwise. Unwise. That was the word that finally broke something open. They hadn't expected resistance here. They had expected compromise, percentages adjusted, language softened, silence restored. Instead, they were being slowed, observed. Judith closed her folder. We'll await formal accounting. As we stood to leave, my father reached for my arm. This doesn't have to go further, he said quietly. I stepped back. It already did when you decided I didn't need to know. Outside, Lauren caught up to me in the hallway. I didn't know, she said again. I swear. I believe you, I replied, but belief doesn't undo impact. She swallowed. They want me to sign tonight. Don't, I said. They'll say I'm betraying them. I met her eyes. They said the same about me. That night, Judith called. They're under pressure, she said, and pressure makes people sloppy. How, I asked. They'll try to close ranks, she replied, or they'll look for someone to carry the blame. I thought of Lauren, of the way my parents had positioned her as both shield and successor. Who, I asked. Judith paused. Whoever signs. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from my father. We need to talk, alone. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, tomorrow, because for the first time the conversation was happening on my terms. And whatever he wanted to say, I was ready to hear it without translating it into something smaller. Because the truth, once it starts surfacing, doesn't ask permission to finish. My father chose a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one lingered and no one listened too closely. Vinyl booths, weak coffee, familiar enough to feel harmless. He was already there when I arrived, hands folded around a mug he hadn't touched. Thank you for coming, he said. I slid into the booth across from him. You said you wanted to talk. He nodded. I need you to understand something. I've been asking for that for months, I replied. He ignored the comment. The business wasn't always stable. There were years when one mistake could have taken everything down. And instead of telling me, I said you hid it. He looked up sharply. We managed it. You buried it, I corrected. Under Grandma's name. Under the trust. His jaw tightened. We did what we had to. That phrase again, the moral shield of necessity. You moved her assets before she died, I said, without telling me, without telling Lauren. He stared at the table. It was cleaner. I felt something cold pass through me. Cleaner for who? For the company, he said. For your mother. For you, I said. He didn't deny it. I knew you'd ask questions, he said quietly. You always did. And that scared you, I replied. He finally met my eyes. It complicated things. No, I said. It exposed them. He sighed heavily. Lauren wasn't supposed to be in the middle of this. She was put there, I said, by you. She agreed, he said. She agreed to what you told her, I replied, which wasn't everything. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Judith will tear this apart, he said finally, if it goes to court. You should have thought about that, I said, before you decided my role without me. His voice hardened. You're risking everything. I'm risking silence, I replied. There's a difference. He leaned back. What do you want? The question surprised me again, not because he asked it, but because it was the first time he sounded unsure. I want the accounting, I said. I want the original documents, and I want the truth acknowledged. That could destroy your mother, he said. I didn't soften my voice. You didn't protect her by lying. You just delayed the cost. He looked older in that moment, smaller. You were always the strong one, he said. We thought you didn't need this. I needed honesty, I replied. You decided I could live without it. The waitress came by. Neither of us ordered. When I stood to leave, he said, if I give you what you're asking for, this won't stay in the family. It stopped being in the family when you excluded me, I said. That night, Lauren called. They're furious, she said. At both of us. At you, I asked. Yes, she said, because I didn't sign. I exhaled slowly. Good. They're saying I'm choosing sides. No, I replied, you're choosing information. She was quiet for a moment. What happens next? Discovery, I said, which means they won't control what comes out. The next morning, Judith confirmed it. They've agreed to limited accounting, she said. Under pressure. Limited, I asked. For now, she replied, but it opens the door. The first batch arrived late that afternoon. Spreadsheets, transfer logs, trust activity summaries. Judith called as she reviewed them. They moved assets in layers, she said. Small shifts, over time, designed not to trigger attention. And Grandma's shares, I asked. Absorbed, she replied, then leveraged. For what I asked. She paused. For personal guarantees tied to company debt. I closed my eyes. They used her, I said. Yes, Judith replied, and they counted on you not noticing. By evening, my phone was lighting up again. Extended family, old family friends, people who had heard just enough to judge. Your parents are under a lot of stress. This is getting ugly. Why can't you let it go? I didn't answer. Instead, I sat at my desk and read the spreadsheets line by line. Dates, amounts, signatures, patterns. By midnight, I understood something crucial. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about shielding liability. And if the trust fell apart, the exposure wouldn't land on my parents alone. It would land on Lauren. I called her immediately. They're using the trust to protect themselves, I said. If it collapses, you could be holding the risk. Her voice went thin. What kind of risk? Debt, I replied. Personal guarantees. She was silent. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, I said, but now you do. The next morning, Judith filed another motion. Expanded discovery. Third-party subpoenas. Financial institutions. This time the response was immediate. My father called twice, my mother once. Lauren texted. They're saying this will ruin everything. I typed back to Lauren. No, it reveals it. That afternoon, Judith called again. They're scrambling, she said, which means mistakes. What kind, I asked. They'll try to pin this on one person, she replied, to contain damage. I thought of the way my parents had always positioned Lauren as the center. The protected one. And now the convenient one. They won't take the fall, I said. They'll pass it. Yes, Judith replied, which is why you need to stay steady. That night, I lay awake thinking about the years I had been told I was independent, like it was a compliment. It wasn't. It was an excuse to leave me out. And now that I had stepped back into the story they thought they controlled, they were realizing something too late. I wasn't asking for power. I was asking for accountability. And that was the one thing their system had never been built to survive. The first subpoena landed like a quiet thunderclap. Judith called me just after 9 in the morning, her voice measured but unmistakably alert. One of the banks responded faster than expected. That's good, I said. It's revealing, she corrected. I sat down at my kitchen table, notebook open, pen poised, even though I knew this wasn't something I could write my way through. They confirmed the trust was used as collateral, she said. Multiple times. For personal exposure, I said. Yes, she replied, which directly contradicts the stated purpose of the restructuring. I closed my eyes. The words Thanksgiving dinner replayed in my head. Stability, continuity, protection. All of it had been a story. What about Lauren, I asked. Judith paused. Her name appears on one of the later guarantees. My stomach dropped. As successor, I asked. As future trustee, she replied, which means if enforcement occurs, she could be implicated. I didn't wait. I called Lauren immediately. She answered on the first ring, breathless. I was just about to call you. They used your name, I said, on a guarantee. There was a long silence on the other end. I never signed anything, she said finally. I know, I replied. But they listed you as future authority. That matters. Her voice shook. They told me it was symbolic. They tell people what's convenient, I said, not what's accurate. I don't want this, she said, any of it. I didn't either, I replied gently. That didn't stop them. That afternoon, the second subpoena response came in. Then the third. Judith forwarded summaries not dramatizing just facts. Intercompany loans, deferred liabilities, trust guarantees structured to obscure personal risk. They were building a buffer, she said when we spoke, using family loyalty as insulation. And I was the variable they couldn't control, I said. Yes, she replied, which is why they removed you. At 3, my mother showed up at my apartment again. She looked tired now, not composed, not strategic, just worn. They're saying you're doing this out of spite, she said as soon as I let her in. I didn't offer her a seat. They say a lot of things. You could stop this, she said, if you wanted. I met her eyes. No, I can't. Her voice rose. You're tearing everything apart. No, I said quietly. I'm letting it fall where it's already cracked. She shook her head. You don't understand the pressure your father was under. I understand exactly, I replied. He chose secrecy instead of honesty. That's not fair, she snapped. It's accurate, I said. She pressed her lips together. If this continues, Lauren will suffer. That's on you, I said. You put her there. Her face tightened. You think you're so righteous? I think I'm done absorbing consequences for other people's choices, I replied. She stared at me, searching for something she could still influence. She found nothing. When she left, my phone buzzed again. Judith. They've requested a private settlement, she said. Quiet, conditional. What kind of conditions, I asked. Non-disclosure, withdrawal of motions, acceptance of revised terms, she replied. They want me quiet, I said. They want you gone, she corrected. And Lauren, I asked. She remains exposed, Judith said. That's not accidental. I called Lauren again that night. They offered to protect you, she said bitterly. If I sign and say I didn't understand the risks. They want you to take a responsibility without authority, I said. Yes, she replied. And they're calling it loyalty. I took a breath. What do you want to do? There was a long pause. I want out, she said, of all of it. That has a cost, I said. I know, she replied, but so does staying. The next morning, Judith filed another motion. Motion to compel. Expanded scope. Protective measures for successor beneficiaries. My father called within minutes. This ends now, he said, his voice tight with panic. It ends when the truth is documented, I replied. You're destroying your sister, he snapped. No, I said. You are. Silence. Then very quietly, you always had to be right. I didn't raise my voice. I had to be informed. He hung up. By evening, word spread through the family network that regulators were circling. Not officially, not publicly, but enough. People stopped calling me. They started calling Lauren. She showed up at my apartment that night, eyes red, shoulders slumped. "They're asking me to choose," she said. I handed her a glass of water. "They already did." She looked at me. "Why didn't they ever think you'd fight back?" I thought about that carefully. "Because I never had before," I said. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke again. "If this goes all the way, will you testify?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Even if it means everything comes out?" she asked. "Yes," I said again, "especially then." She nodded slowly. "Then I will too." That was the moment the balance shifted. Not because of law, not because of leverage, because the person they had used as a shield stepped out of the way. Judith called later that night, her voice steady but unmistakably energized. "They're panicking," she said, "and now they're alone." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of months begin to redistribute. They had built a system that depended on silence. Mine, Lauren's, everyone's. And now, one by one, those silences were breaking. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just firmly enough that the truth could finally move through. And once it did, nothing they had hidden would remain where they left it. Once Lauren agreed to testify, everything accelerated. Judith warned me this would happen. When the wrong person stops cooperating, the timeline collapses. What had been dragged out for months suddenly compressed into days. The next subpoena response wasn't partial. It was complete. Judith called me just after noon. "We have internal emails," she said. "Not summaries, originals." I closed my laptop and stood up, pacing the length of my apartment. "From whom?" I asked. "Your father." "The firm." "And a private advisor," she replied. "They assumed these would never be requested." "Assumed wrong," I said. "She emailed them while we were on the phone." I didn't read everything at once. I couldn't. I opened one thread and let it unfold slowly. My father writing about timing, about needing to move assets before anyone asks questions, about me being out of town and unlikely to push. One line made my chest tighten. "She's strong. She'll adapt." They hadn't underestimated my resilience. They had weaponized it. Another email followed, this one between my parents and the advisor. "Better to deal with one daughter than two. Lauren will comply. The other one will calm down." I sat down hard in the chair. Lauren arrived an hour later, pale but steady. "They showed me the emails," she said. "I didn't know they talked about us like that." "Children are easier to manage when they're categories," I replied. She nodded slowly. "They never planned for us to compare notes." "No," I said. "They planned for us to stay separate." Judith called again. "We're moving into regulatory territory," she said. "The emails suggest intent." "That changes things," I said. "Yes," she replied. "This is no longer just family drama." That evening, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message, his voice strained. "You've made your point. This has gone far enough." I deleted it. An hour later, my mother called. "You've humiliated us," she said. "People are talking." "They should," I replied. "You relied on no one looking too closely." She gasped. "How can you do this to your own family?" I didn't raise my voice. "You did this to yourselves." She hung up. The following morning, Judith met with Lauren separately. When she called me afterward, her tone was serious but calm. "She's credible," she said, and frightened. "Of them?" I asked. "Of what happens when she stops being useful," Judith replied. By noon, the regulators made their first formal request. Interviews, document preservation, no asset movement without approval, a quiet freeze. The company reacted immediately. Executives stepped back. Advisors went silent. The machinery that had always moved smoothly suddenly stalled. My father texted me for the first time instead of calling. "You don't understand what you're risking." I typed back. "I understand exactly what I was protecting for you." He didn't respond. That afternoon, Lauren and I sat together in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of printed emails and notes. "They always said you were dramatic," she said quietly. I smiled without humor. "They said you were fragile." She looked up at me. Neither of those were true. "No," I agreed. "They were convenient." At 6, Judith called with the update that finally shifted my breathing. "They're preparing charges," she said. "Not public yet, but formal." "Against whom?" I asked. She paused. "Your father, possibly the advisor." "And my mother?" I asked. "She signed," Judith replied. "But the intent language isn't as clear." I closed my eyes. This was the moment people imagine when they think of revenge. The downfall, the reckoning. What I felt instead was something quieter. Release. "They'll try to negotiate," Judith continued. "They'll want you and Lauren silent." "I won't be," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why this is happening." That night I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from memory. Every time I had been told not to worry. Every time I had been praised for being low maintenance. Every time I had absorbed discomfort to keep the peace. So it hadn't made me noble. It had made me predictable. And predictability was what they had counted on. The next morning, Lauren sent me a message before I was fully awake. "They asked me to say you influenced me." I sat up immediately. "What did you say?" I typed. "That I finally understood. A minute passed. Then another message. They said you were turning me against them. I typed carefully. They don't like losing control. Her reply came almost instantly. Then they should have told the truth sooner. By noon, the first official notice was served. Not dramatic, not public, just real. Judith forwarded it with a single sentence. This is the point where they can't undo it. I stood by the window watching people walk past on the street below, unaware of how much had shifted in the last 48 hours. My family wasn't imploding because I asked questions. It was collapsing because it had been built on silence. And silence once broken doesn't grow back. It just leaves space. Space for the truth. And for the first time, that space belonged to me. The interview notice arrived by certified mail on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of envelope that feels heavier than it looks. I didn't open it right away. I recognized the return address and set it on the counter, letting it sit between my keys and my phone like a boundary I would cross when I was ready. Judith called before I finished my coffee. They're requesting formal testimony, she said. Voluntary but on the record. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I expected that. This is where tone matters, she continued. Not emotion, not interpretation. Facts. I know I said, and I did. I had been rehearsing facts in my head for months, not because I wanted to accuse, but because I needed to remember clearly. Memory had become a form of protection. Lauren came over an hour later carrying nothing but her phone and attention she couldn't set down. They scheduled mine too, she said. Same day I asked. She nodded, back to back. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Thanksgiving had ended, and I noticed how different the air felt now. No dread, no guessing. Just a quiet understanding that whatever happened next would be documented, not negotiated. They keep asking if I'm okay, Lauren said, like I'm fragile. They ask when they want reassurance, I replied, not because they care about the answer. She let out a breath. I didn't realize how much I adjusted myself to fit what they needed. Me neither, I said, until I stopped. The interview room was smaller than I imagined. Neutral walls, 2 investigators, a recorder placed carefully in the center of the table, like a reminder that this conversation would outlive all of us. They began with background questions, names, dates, relationships. I answered steadily, keeping my hands folded in my lap so they wouldn't shake. Then they moved to the trust. When were you first informed of the amendment, one of them asked. After it was executed, I replied. Were you consulted prior, the other asked. No. Were you informed that assets were transferred under a power of attorney before your grandmother's death? No. They exchanged a glance and continued. They asked about my involvement in the business. I described it plainly. Emails, reviews, unpaid contributions, no embellishment. Were you aware the trust was used to secure personal guarantees, one asked. No, I said, and that omission was material. The word felt right in my mouth. Material, not emotional, not dramatic, just accurate. When it was over, one of them thanked me for my cooperation. The recorder clicked off with a finality that settled in my chest. Outside, Judith waited. You did well, she said. I told the truth, I replied. That's what I meant, she said. Lauren went in next. I waited in the hallway, staring at a framed print of a landscape that meant nothing to me, listening to the muffled cadence of voices behind the door. When she came out, her eyes were red but steady. They asked if I felt pressured, she said. And I asked. I said yes, she replied, because I did. We didn't speak much on the drive home. There was nothing left to coordinate, no strategy to align. The record existed now, independent of us. That evening, my father emailed me again. This doesn't have to end like this. I stared at the message, feeling no pull to respond. The ending had already happened. He was just noticing it now. Judith called later with an update that made my shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. They're moving forward, she said, formally, with what I asked. Charges related to fiduciary misuse and disclosure failures, she replied. The advisor, too. And the trust, I asked. It's frozen pending review, she said. No authority exercised without oversight. I closed my eyes. Lauren texted me from the other room. They can't make me sign anything now, I typed back. They never should have tried. The fallout didn't explode the way people imagine. It seeped. Family friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The quiet social penalties that come when people don't know where to place blame and don't want it to land on them. My mother sent a message I didn't open. My father stopped trying. Lauren moved out of the house the following weekend, packing only what fit in her car. They told me I was abandoning them, she said, as we unloaded boxes into her new place. They confused control with care, I replied. That night alone in my apartment, I felt something unfamiliar. Space. Not the absence of family, but the absence of pressure. No one expecting me to smooth things over. No one assigning me the role of reasonable buffer. Just me. I thought about the word revenge, how easily people use it to describe any act of resistance. as if standing up for yourself must always come from cruelty. This hadn't been cruelty. It had been refusal. Refusal to stay quiet. Refusal to accept narratives written without me. Refusal to protect systems that required my erasure. A week later, the notice arrived confirming the next phase of proceedings. Dates, protocols, timelines. I read it once, then set it aside. The most important part had already happened. I had told the truth when it mattered. I had stopped translating other people's choices into my responsibility. I had let consequences find the people who created them. As I turned off the light that night, I realized something that made my chest feel steady. No matter how this ended legally, it had already ended personally. They no longer decided who I was allowed to be, and that freedom once claimed doesn't need permission to last. The waiting was worse than the conflict. Once the interviews were over and the filings were made, life didn't pause dramatically the way movies suggest. It kept moving in small, ordinary ways that made the consequences feel distant, almost unreal. Groceries still needed to be bought. Emails still arrived. Mornings still came whether I was ready or not. But underneath that normalcy, something irreversible was unfolding. Judith warned me about this phase. This is when people start rewriting the past, she said. Not for the record, for themselves. I understood what she meant the first time my mother tried again. Her message came late at night, longer than the others carefully worded. We did the best we could with what we knew. No one is perfect. Families make mistakes. I read it once and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just distance. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for relief from responsibility. I didn't reply. A few days later, Lauren called me from her new apartment. They want me to come home, she said. Just for dinner. Like nothing happened. I leaned back against the counter. Do you want to? No, she said, but I feel like I'm supposed to. That feeling, I said, is how they kept control. She exhaled slowly. I don't know how to exist without managing their reactions. You learn, I replied, by not doing it. She was quiet for a moment. You're better at this than I am. I've had more practice being invisible, I said. That's all. That week, the first formal notice of intent arrived from the regulator. Not charges yet, but findings. Language that acknowledged wrongdoing without announcing punishment. A step closer to accountability. Judith walked me through it carefully. They're establishing a pattern, she said. Repeated behavior, not a one-time lapse. And my father, I asked. His name, she replied. Clearly. I nodded. The strange thing was hearing that didn't hurt. What hurt was remembering all the times I had defended him to other people. All the times I had assumed there was context I didn't understand. All the times I had trusted that exclusion was accidental. Trust once broken doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes. Lauren came over that weekend carrying takeout and a heaviness that hadn't left her yet. They told me I owe them, she said suddenly as we sat on the couch. Owe them what I asked. Loyalty, she replied. For everything they gave me. I turned toward her. Did they ever ask what it cost you? She shook her head. They confuse investment with ownership, I said. Parents don't own their children. She stared at the floor. They made it sound like you walked away because you were angry. I smiled faintly. I walked away because I finally saw clearly. The next call came from an unexpected number. An old family friend, someone who had known me since childhood. I just wanted to say, she began carefully, this must be hard for your parents. I let the silence stretch before replying. It's been hard for me for a long time, I said. She didn't know what to say after that. Neither did I care. A few days later, Judith called with another update. They're proposing a settlement with regulators, she said. Financial penalties, oversight, no admission of guilt. And the trust, I asked. It will be restructured, she replied. Third-party trustee, no family control. That was it. The thing they had rearranged the entire family to protect would no longer belong to them. I felt something loosen in my chest. Lauren texted me when she heard, so all of this was for nothing. I typed back, it wasn't for nothing, it was for control. She replied a minute later, and now they don't have it. That evening, I went for a long walk alone, letting the city noise ground me. I passed families heading to dinner, couples arguing quietly, strangers moving past each other without history or obligation. For the first time, I felt like one of them. Not someone defined by a role, not the responsible one, not the adaptable one, just a person. At home, I opened my laptop and started writing something I hadn't planned to write. Not for anyone else, not for court, not even for closure. For myself, I wrote down the moments that had changed everything. The Thanksgiving table, the email timestamp, the power of attorney. The first time I said no without explaining myself. When I finished, I closed the document without saving it. I didn't need proof anymore. The proof existed everywhere else. That night, Lauren sent me one last message before sleep. Do you think they'll ever understand? I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Understanding isn't required for truth to matter. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief, not victory. Alignment. For once, my inner life matched the choices I was making, and that I knew was something no one could ever take from me again. The final notice arrived on a Monday morning, plain and unremarkable, which felt appropriate. Consequences rarely announce themselves with drama. They arrive looking like paperwork. Judith called an hour later. "It's finalized," she said. I sat at my desk, hands resting flat, waiting for the rest. "Your parents accepted the settlement," she continued. "Penalties, oversight, removal from fiduciary control. And the trust I asked, administered externally now," she replied. "No family authority, no discretionary maneuvering." I nodded slowly. "They didn't contest," she added, "which tells me they were advised not to," meaning the evidence was worse than what had surfaced. After we hung up, I sat there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment. No rush of emotion followed the news. No vindication. Just a steady sense of closure, like the final page of a chapter that had been exhausting to live inside. Lauren came over that evening. "They told me it's over," she said, setting her bag down by the door, "that we should try to move on." I raised an eyebrow. "On their terms." She gave a tired smile, always. We sat at the table, the same one where this had started eating quietly. "They asked if I'd come back," she said. "Not to work, just to be around." And I asked. "I said I needed time," she replied, which felt like saying no without starting a war. "That's growth," I said. She looked at me carefully. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed quiet?" I didn't answer immediately. "I wish they had told the truth before silence became the only option," I said. "But no, I don't regret speaking." She nodded. "Neither do I." That night, my mother sent one final message. "I hope one day you'll see we did what we thought was right." I read it twice, then closed my phone. Doing what you think is right doesn't excuse refusing to listen when someone tells you it hurts. A few days later, I ran into my father unexpectedly at a grocery store. The same one where months earlier I had stood in line unaware my place in the family had already been erased. He looked thinner, older, less certain. "Rebecca," he said. "Dad," I replied. An awkward pause stretched between us. "I never wanted it to end like this," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "You just didn't want to change it." He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "You were always strong." I felt the old reflex rise, the urge to translate his words into something kinder. I let it pass. "Strength isn't silence," I said. "It's boundaries." He didn't argue. We parted without resolution, but without hostility either. That felt like the most honest ending we were capable of. As winter deepened, my life settled into something unfamiliar but welcome. There were no urgent calls, no emotional emergencies to manage, no expectations I hadn't agreed to. Lauren found her footing slowly. New routines, new friendships, a cautious optimism she hadn't been allowed to practice before. "They don't know who I am without them," she told me one evening. "That's not your problem," I said. "It's your opportunity." She smiled, tentative but real. One afternoon, Judith emailed me a short note. "Just checking in, you did well," I replied with a simple thank you. Not because I needed validation, but because I recognized something important. I had done what I could with integrity. The rest was no longer mine to carry. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood by the window and watched snow fall lightly onto the street below. Each flake disappeared as soon as it touched the ground, leaving no mark of where it had been. I thought about legacy then. Not money, not control, but the quiet understanding that comes when you stop allowing others to define your worth. They had tried to reduce me to a contingency. I had refused. And in doing so, I had reclaimed something far more enduring than inheritance. My name, my voice, my agency. The final chapter wasn't about punishment. It was about release. And I was ready to step fully into it. The silence, after everything settled, was not empty. It was intentional. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing waiting for me to fix, soften, or absorb. No family tension humming in the background. No unspoken expectation that I would be the reasonable one, the buffer, the bridge. I woke up one Saturday morning and realized no one needed anything from me. That was the moment I understood how much of my identity had been built around being needed in ways that erased me. Lauren and I met for breakfast at a small place near her new apartment. She looked different. Not happier exactly, but lighter. Like someone whose shoulders were no longer pulled upward by invisible strings. "They sent me an invitation," she said, stirring her coffee. "Christmas. Just a small thing," they said. "And how did that make you feel?" I asked. She thought for a moment. Old. Like I was about to step back into a version of myself I don't recognize anymore. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I said no," she replied, without explaining. I smiled. "That's not rejection, that's clarity." She nodded. "I learned that from you." I didn't correct her. We had learned it together, just at different speeds. As winter turned into early spring, the story lost its urgency everywhere except inside me. People stopped whispering. The company stabilized under outside oversight. My parents withdrew from public life quietly, carefully, the way people do when they want to avoid being asked questions they can no longer answer. The trust existed now as what it should have been all along, a structure, not a weapon. I never asked what my final share was, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined anything important. Money can repair damage, but it can't restore dignity once you've traded it away. Judith checked in one last time. "There's nothing else you need to do," she said, "unless you want to." "I don't," I replied. She paused. "Most people would have pushed for more." "I pushed for truth," I said. "That was enough." One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old photo of my grandmother and me. I was maybe 10, sitting at her kitchen table reading something while she watched me with that quiet, knowing smile. She had always seen me. I kept the photo and threw away the rest. A few weeks later, my father sent a short message. No explanations, no defenses. "I'm trying to live differently now." I read it, acknowledged it privately, and didn't respond. Change doesn't need witnesses to be real. My life didn't become extraordinary after that. It became honest. Work felt lighter without the weight of invisible obligations. Friendships deepened without the constant need to explain why family gatherings felt complicated. Even solitude became something I chose, not something assigned to me. One evening, Lauren asked me something unexpected. "If you could go back," she said, "would you warn yourself?" I considered it carefully. "No," I replied. "I would trust myself to notice when something felt wrong." That was the lesson. Not to predict betrayal, but to believe your perception when it arrives. The story people tell about revenge is that it's about watching others fall, that it's loud, that it's cruel. This wasn't that. No one was destroyed. But a system built on manipulation lost its power, and the people who depended on silence to stay comfortable had to sit with the truth instead. That was karma enough. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of it, hear this clearly. Being excluded doesn't mean you are unworthy. Being labeled difficult doesn't mean you are wrong. Being told to wait your turn doesn't mean one exists. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from not understanding you. I didn't win control of a company. I didn't inherit a legacy. I reclaimed something quieter, stronger, and permanent. My boundaries, my clarity, my self-respect. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, workplace, or marriage, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell your story. And if you want more stories about truth, accountability, and dignity reclaimed, subscribe and stay with the channel. Because silence protects systems that don't deserve it. And the moment you stop offering it, everything changes. The silence after everything settled was not empty. It was intentional. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing waiting for me to fix, soften, or absorb. No family tension humming in the background. No unspoken expectation that I would be the reasonable one, the buffer, the bridge. I woke up one Saturday morning and realized no one needed anything from me. That was the moment I understood how much of my identity had been built around being needed in ways that erased me. Lauren and I met for breakfast at a small place near her new apartment. She looked different. Not happier exactly, but lighter, like someone whose shoulders were no longer pulled upward by invisible strings. "They sent me an invitation," she said, stirring her coffee. "Christmas. Just a small thing," they said. "And how did that make you feel?" I asked. She thought for a moment. Old. Like I was about to step back into a version of myself I don't recognize anymore. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I said no," she replied, without explaining. I smiled. "That's not rejection, that's clarity." She nodded. "I learned that from you." I didn't correct her. We had learned it together, just at different speeds. As winter turned into early spring, the story lost its urgency everywhere except inside me. People stopped whispering. The company stabilized under outside oversight. My parents withdrew from public life quietly, carefully, the way people do when they want to avoid being asked questions they can no longer answer. The trust existed now as what it should have been all along, a structure, not a weapon. I never asked what my final share was. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined anything important. Money can repair damage, but it can't restore dignity once you've traded it away. Judith checked in one last time. "There's nothing else you need to do," she said, "unless you want to." "I don't," I replied. She paused. "Most people would have pushed for more." "I pushed for truth," I said. That was enough. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old photo of my grandmother and me. I was maybe 10. sitting at her kitchen table reading something while she watched me with that quiet, knowing smile. She had always seen me. I kept the photo and threw away the rest. A few weeks later, my father sent a short message. No explanations, no defenses. I'm trying to live differently now. I read it, acknowledged it privately, and didn't respond. Change doesn't need witnesses to be real. My life didn't become extraordinary after that. It became honest. Work felt lighter, without the weight of invisible obligations. Friendships deepened without the constant need to explain why family gatherings felt complicated. Even solitude became something I chose, not something assigned to me. One evening, Lauren asked me something unexpected. If you could go back, she said, would you warn yourself? I considered it carefully. No, I replied. I would trust myself to notice when something felt wrong. That was the lesson. Not to predict betrayal, but to believe your perception when it arrives. The story people tell about revenge is that it's about watching others fall, that it's loud, that it's cruel. This wasn't that. No one was destroyed. But a system built on manipulation lost its power, and the people who depended on silence to stay comfortable had to sit with the truth instead. That was karma enough. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of it, hear this clearly. Being excluded doesn't mean you are unworthy. Being labeled difficult doesn't mean you are wrong. Being told to wait your turn doesn't mean one exists. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from not understanding you. I didn't win control of a company. I didn't inherit a legacy. I reclaimed something quieter, stronger, and permanent. My boundaries, my clarity, my self-respect. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, workplace, or marriage, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell your story. And if you want more stories about truth, accountability, and dignity reclaimed, subscribe and stay with the channel. Because silence protects systems that don't deserve it. And the moment you stop offering it, everything changes.